presence who the king of Twitter is, and it is not Hattiesburg, Mississippi.
Well, apparently the NCAA thinks so.
Well, the NCAA, as we know, is corrupt and stupid and evil.
Yeah, I don't know your antics. I did
I
get a good laugh out of
have
them.
nothing to answer for.
I mean, I'm
One of
calling
us
them
has,
antics for a
one
reason.
of us has to be good at Twitter, and it's certainly not you.
That's a fair statement. That is a fair statement. But would I call this good at Twitter?
Hello and welcome to another episode of Bad Take Blake. I'm coming at you live from the Applebee's parking lot in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Today we got a very exciting episode. We are talking Colorado to the Big 12, an 8-game SEC conference schedule, super regional preview, but we start in the state of Ohio with the Bad Take of the Week.
Hey guys, it's true. If you're from Hattiesburg, that's okay. I'm friends with Hattiesburg, Mississippi. I've driven through there. No one's really been there because there's nothing to do there. But
one light, two horse.
I'm wearing a rainbow shirt, guys. We accept everyone. I am inclusive.
We do not accept
all.
everyone. We do not accept the mustard pigeons of Hattiesburg, Mississippi. But first, we start in Ohio. Some people would call Mississippi the taint of America. That makes Ohio the armpit.
Facts.
So Ohio State fans are bent all out of shape because the SEC has decided to stick with an 8-game schedule instead of a 9-game schedule. We will get into that a little bit later in the show, but we're opening with our bad take of the week. Normally, we only do media members because, media members get paid. They should have a little bit of accountability to not just say stupid shit. But this was just so dumb, I couldn't let it slide under the rug. An Ohio State fan, Charisma the Supreme, @_KTS_. I hate doing this because I don't like to give them this attention because that's what they want. They want clicks. They said that we would struggle with Rutgers. Y'all suck against good defenses, that's all the Big Ten has. I think you're confusing good defenses with bad offenses. First off, he's got a series of tweets. This is the one that I chose. But to suggest that the 10-2 Orange Bowl champion Tennessee Volunteers would struggle with Rutgers, who didn't make a bowl, is preposterous. Furthermore, he said that the Big Ten was better than the SEC, which is preposterous.
This isn't an unpopular opinion among people who are in the Big Ten. I live in Chicago. I have friends, and you guys that have listened know this. Peter, I'll shout you out because I know you listen. I'm talking Iowa, Indiana, and let
me ask you a question.
What's up?
Did Wisconsin have to play Michigan or Ohio State this past year?
I think. Did they not?
I don't know. I don't think so because they're in the Big Ten West, not the Big Ten East. The Big Ten West is a joke. Like, that might be the worst division in Power 5 football. Now, whenever I say that, you have to keep in mind the Big 12 and the ACC. ACC has divisions, Big 12 does not.
I don't know. I think you could make an argument.
To suggest that the Big Ten schedule is easier than the SEC is, it's a clown car of buffoonery is what it is. The SEC, if you plopped an 8-4 South Carolina team into the Big Ten West, that's a 10-win team. If you plop them into the Big Ten East, I think it might be a 10-win team.
I think if you were to pop a team, and I've made this comment again, Peter, you've heard me say it. I think I over-exaggerated on previous podcasts about what he thought, but I've heard many times, and I've said this, if you popped a team like South Carolina, Ole Miss, I think that if they had to play Ohio State or Michigan every year, I think they would consistently beat one a year.
You value Ole Miss so much more than I do. I do not respect Ole Miss at all. And part of that is because they beat Alabama twice whenever we were in high school, and I understand that. But this isn't the hookers and blow Ole Miss of Hugh Freeze's youth. This is Lane Kiffin's Ole Miss, who limped to 10 wins 2 years ago with one of the easiest schedules in the SEC.
In the SEC, though, that could be a tough schedule in other places.
Well, it's like in the old NCAA video games. playing in the SEC, you automatically have an A- difficult schedule. It doesn't matter what division. Now, if you're Tennessee or Auburn and you have to play Alabama and Georgia every year, automatic A+. So that makes a pretty easy transition into the first main topic of conversation today. The SEC has opted to stick with 8 games during the 2024 season, which will be the first season that Oklahoma and Texas officially join. I understand it.
That is next year, right?
Yes.
We've confirmed that's next year.
Not this upcoming season, the next season.
Okay.
2024. The plan for that is to eliminate divisions, so you will be getting rid of a lot of rivalries that have been around since divisions formed in, I believe it was 1992. I'm not a fan of the 8-game conference schedule.
I'm not either.
I will maintain 8 games in the SEC is harder than 9 games in any other conference, but you will lose a lot of traditional rivalries. The third Saturday in October, which is the second oldest rivalry in the SEC behind only Georgia and Auburn, that will likely go away, at least not be a yearly thing. And those are really the 2 pillars that built the SEC if you look back through the years. Not so much the last 15 years, but the first 60. No team has more wins on Tennessee than Alabama. No team has more wins on Alabama than Tennessee. And for that rivalry to discontinue, number one, it benefits Tennessee because Alabama is currently the second best program in the country behind only Georgia. And up until recently, Alabama was the best in the country, undisputed.
But they still could be in the last 10 years, but go on.
In the last 10 years, they are. I'm talking the last 2 years. The last year specifically. But to see, and like that's a big rivalry, but there are other rivalries that we're probably going to see not occur every year. Florida and Georgia comes to mind. It's either going to be Florida and Georgia or it's going to be Auburn and Georgia. LSU and Florida probably won't happen. I think Florida and Georgia will probably be the one permanent rival. I personally was a fan of the 9-game schedule where you had 3 teams you played every year. For Tennessee, it probably would have been Alabama, Vanderbilt, Kentucky. And then you flip. You play one set of teams every year, and then the next year you play the next set of teams. It's much better than the system we've been going with, where you might play in A&M once every 14 years, for example.
My big question is, and I've seen some people say this on Twitter, they're like, okay, well, it'll be good for TV ratings because when those teams do meet up, more people are going to watch. I don't think that. I think the same amount of people, and maybe a little bit more, but I think the same amount of people are going to be watching that would have wanted to see that every year. I think you'd make more money in the doing it year versus every others, because I don't think you're going to get double the viewers just because they haven't played in a year.
I think that that answer that you just gave is a coward's answer. It's not a secret why they want to stay at 8 games. It's because the SEC is the toughest conference in college football. It's the toughest conference in several sports now, with baseball, with softball, women's basketball, softball especially whenever Oklahoma joins. And you know what? We'll give a little bit of spotlight to the Oklahoma softball team. 50 straight wins. That's incredible. That's a dynasty. Probably going to win the whole thing. Congratulations to the Lady Sooners. But playing in the SEC is incredibly difficult. Whenever you are South Carolina, who has 8 SEC games, and then you have to play Clemson as one of your out of conference every year. Whenever you're Florida and you have to play Florida State as your out of conference every year, stuff like that tends to wear on you. I think it's more of a hedge to make sure that we get now with 12 teams, 2 or 3 SEC teams into the playoff every year. Josh Pate made a really good point. I'm going to give credit to him because I had not heard this point before, but I tend to agree with it. We are seeing it this year where Alabama was 10-2, Tennessee was 10-2. The committee did not value those 2 wins the same as they valued the two losses, the same as they valued the 2 losses, or they valued them the same as the 2 losses that Oregon and Utah and USC had. But those 2 losses are not equal. Alabama lost to the SEC West champion LSU and a top 5 Tennessee team. Georgia beat Tennessee whenever it was the number 1v1 game. And then the other loss Tennessee had was a South Carolina, who the very next week beat another 10-win team, ACC champion Clemson. Those 2 losses are worth more than 2 losses that you could find anywhere else in the conference. Even Penn
think that's
State's 2 losses to Michigan and Ohio State, I think, are not as good losses as Alabama's 2 losses.
I think that's fair. And you'll probably speed me up on this. This is a little off topic because I know I feel bad and I'm feeling how bad do you feel for teams? And I know it's probably a lot for teams like Memphis. All of these schools are, they're getting into these power conferences. And at the end of the day,
let's put a pin in that because we are going to talk expansion
Okay.
in a full segment. And
Okay.
I have some comments on that because we're going to
I know it's really hurting your heart.
We're going to talk. Well, we'll talk about it more. I'm not like tap dancing on Memphis's grave. I do have a degree from their law school. I would like for them to be successful, but ultimately what has held Memphis back has been Memphis. It hasn't been some conspiracy.
I agree with that. We'll get into that later.
So yeah, we're getting rid of divisions, which Florida, the leader for most SEC East division wins, and obviously Alabama for SEC West. Those will be retired. The bright spot is Tennessee, Auburn, Tennessee, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Mississippi State. These are games that were played a lot before 1992, which will now have the opportunity to be played again. Newer rivalries, such as, the Twitter beef between Arkansas and Tennessee has really kicked up the last couple of years. It will allow for those games to be played more in football.
Mm-hmm.
Bad news is Tennessee, Kentucky might go away. Tennessee, Vanderbilt. I think that'll end up being the yearly game because it's in state. But, Tennessee, Florida, if I had to pick like a rivalry, Tennessee, Florida is first on the chopping block.
At this point, isn't Kentucky like that game only hurts y'all?
No.
Especially going forward.
We win that game every year.
Well, y'all lost it 3 years ago?
We've lost it 3 times in the last 50 years. And one of those times was a 5-7 season. One of those times was the worst season in Tennessee history. And another time was the second worst season in Tennessee history. I am truly unlike Kentucky.
Okay. So why? Why is that something like, I wouldn't.
Why is that a rivalry?
Well, I kind of get why it's a rivalry, but you were saying like rivalries are gonna go away.
They're not going to be played on a year-to-year basis. They're not going to be protected. You're going to get one protected rival.
Yeah, no, but I understand that. But like,
for 2024,
that's good. That's good for Tennessee because again, that game only hurts y'all. It doesn't help y'all to beat them. It only hurts y'all. So isn't that a good thing for y'all?
I like a free win.
In football, it's a little bit different because you only get 12 games.
Well, but we are only talking the football schedule. The basketball scheduling and the baseball scheduling, I imagine, will remain very similar.
Just because they play. I don't know. I think that game only hurts y'all. So if I were you, I'd be like, oh, hell yeah. I don't want to play. If we don't have to.
I don't know. I mean, 10 years ago, that game only hurts you. But now that people are like, oh, Mark Stoops, best coach in Kentucky history. Mark Stoops, 2, 3, 10-win seasons. All those 10-win seasons, he's got a loss to Tennessee on his resume.
True. Moving on.
All right, let's segue into the main topic of today's conversation, and that is conference expansion. Now, we originally planned on recording this on Monday. I'm glad we waited because we have official word now that Colorado and Arizona are leaving the Pac-12 and heading to the Big 12. This is likely signaling the end of the Pac-12 conference. I have some very burning questions about certain teams in the Big 12. But right now, I think what we're waiting to see is what's going to happen with Oregon and Washington. As long as Oregon and Washington remain, the Pac-12 has a tent pole to stand on. Now, vice versa to that, getting Colorado is big because Deion's there, but I don't think Deion's going to be at Colorado forever. I think it's more about the Big 12 poaching teams from other Power 5 conference than it is about those programs themselves. The only thing you really gain from those two conferences off the cuff is Arizona basketball.
That's true.
Additionally, UConn is coming into that conference in all sports. So their coach, Jim Mora, made a comment. It's like, we want to achieve the pinnacle, which is a national championship. And to say that at UConn is kind of funny. But it's also like that's what every coach should strive for. Them moving out of independent into the Big 12 makes that more viable. And also their basketball moving into the Big 12 is a real big wrinkle. We talked a lot about how great UConn was in the Big East, historic rivals. That was the reason they left the American Athletic. As a Memphis fan, I imagine you have to feel some type of way about UConn being invited to the Big 12.
100%. And Me and my dad talked about this the other day. It's just I mean, we had a chance to join the SEC, what, 40 years ago? A long time, not 40, but a long time ago. Yeah, no,
Are
no,
you
we really
sure
did.
about that?
Positive. I'll call my dad and get him on the pod right now. He told me all about it. But as you said about this earlier, Memphis is Memphis's biggest enemy in us getting in another conference. And when we dumped,
The worst thing Memphis did about it's been about 20 years ago now, was instead of investing in football and basketball and baseball, they decided to take a back seat, let the Liberty Bowl run the football stadium, let the Forum run the basketball stadium, and just try to lose the reputation of Memphis State, try to be an academic institution, which they never really accomplished because they never really raised their standards. And the only thing you did was sort of rebrand. And now I think a lot of the OGs prefer the Memphis State moniker.
they do. And we constantly are facing situations like we just had in baseball. Our baseball coach just left to Missouri. We we get these coaches, and I get it. Like, until we get in a big conference, we're a stepping stone. We're always going to be a stepping stone. So this guy comes in the baseball program. We weren't incredible this year, but there was definitely a turnaround. Got some better recruits in, stuff like that. Well, Missouri offers him a job, and he's
I would consider it a very, very large step in the right direction for Memphis. Now, there was some talk about how a former Memphis assistant is the one that poached him.
I didn't hear that.
I'm reading the comments of the Daily Memphian, as one does. There was a little bit of animosity about how he left, not so much on him, but on I believe it was the assistant athletic director for Missouri. I don't know a ton about the situation. I don't follow Missouri, who I don't even consider an SEC member.
No, a lot of people don't.
But UConn to the Big 12.
It's great for them. Sucks for me. It's just another year where it's another team. Louisville did it. I mean, we've seen it a million times. Cincinnati did it.
Well, I mean, specifically UConn, because y'all were all set to join the American Athletic Conference at the time, the Big East. And UConn basically said, we're just going to go independent and join the Big East because we don't want to be with these lesser tier schools. They went to the Big East, the whatever conference that all those historic rivals have been, minus Syracuse, the Xavier Marquette Conference, rebranded to the Big East, which the American Athletic should have kept the name in hindsight.
Yeah, I don't know why they didn't. That seemed like, I think they were trying to kind of turn a new leaf, but they kind of turned on that. Yeah. Big East. This is the
the Big East was able to keep all this tradition with those historic basketball schools. UConn has won 2 national titles since then.
Yeah.
Is it 2 or is it 3?
It sucks. Look, as a Memphis fan, I've been stepped over my whole life. Every about 3 or 4 years, we start thinking, we hear these rumors. Oh, we might get in here. We might get in there, blah, blah, blah. And yet again, we were just stepped over. And it sucks seeing teams like that. Does UConn have a better TV market than Memphis?
Yes.
Significantly, though?
Yes. One benefit, I will say. They reported that Memphis had the 5th largest TV market for Game 2 of the finals. That's a step in the right direction.
It is.
Now, TV markets is like a real 2012 way of looking at things. That's why Rutgers was able to get into the Big Ten. I think the reality is TV markets aren't as big a deal with streaming, and what people want are revenue generators. And UConn is definitely more of a revenue generator at the big sports than Memphis is. And by the big sports, I mean football, basketball.
You would go out and say you think more people, yeah, I guess you're right. I would say probably more people tune into a UConn versus, Indiana State or whoever than a Memphis versus, CBU or whatever like that. And that's kind of what it boils down to. Who's getting the most viewers on not the primetime games, because obviously everyone's going to tune into those. It's the smaller games that you need the bigger viewerships for to cover the bottom line.
Now, I have in my notes that the Pac-12 is doomed. I'm going to backpedal that. I'm going to backpedal that. Now, hear me out. The Pac-12 still has they're in trouble. We talked about Washington State and Cal and their financial situation 2 weeks ago on episode 15. But they still have Oregon and Washington. Oregon has been a consistent top 25 basketball program and a top 10 football program. Washington has floated in and out of the top 10 in football, and it looks like their new coach could keep them in the top 10 or at least
Seems like
top
he's there to
15.
stay too.
Michael Penix Jr. is coming back. It's going to be a big year, and we're going to see what's up in terms of the Pac-12 football. Utah, now their coach is old, but they are the two-time Rose Bowl champion, two-time Pac-12 champion. Not Rose Bowl. Penn State beat them in the Rose Bowl. The Pac-12 is not dead yet. Now, if Oregon and Washington get poached, it will be, and Utah is going to be left out of the cold. But until then, they still have two tent poles that you can stake your conference on. One of them being backed by the largest sports brand in North America in Nike. As long as they have Oregon, the Pac-12 is not going anywhere. On the flip side of that, the Big 12, like we just said, it's interesting that they poach these two schools that are not necessarily these giant brands. They're losing their tent poles of Oklahoma and Texas. And I'm going to continue to use that metaphor. And if you don't know what that means, the tent pole is what is propping up your conference. It is the big brand that drives your revenue. Like everyone wants to go see Texas play. If Texas is going to Manhattan, Kansas to play Kansas State, the Kansas State Wildcats are tuning into that game. If they're going to Lubbock, Texas, the Texas Tech Red Raiders are tuning into that game. They're buying tickets. That is the major media market that is driving your conference. Who is that in the Big 12 at this point for football? I don't think they have one. And this brings me to a very interesting point. Is Nebraska better off trying to go back to the Big 12 to be that tent pole, to be the dominant guy, to resurrect the Big 12 Nebraska football that won 3 titles in the 90s, and to officially become the spokesperson of that conference in the largest revenue generating sport in North America in college athletics? In North America, I mean, football in the NFL is another. It's a larger revenue generator.
That's like another realm, though. I'm going to be honest with you, Davis. That never even crossed my mind, and that is a very, very interesting point.
They have struggled in the Big Ten. They're not a cultural or a regional fit to the Big Ten, but they are what we would consider a historic blue blood. At least I would. And whenever we were talking about blue bloods a few weeks ago, I think you said we have to include Nebraska. It makes sense for them to go back, and then maybe Nebraska comes back, and the Big 12 is able to drive some new media rights deal, and suddenly these other historic Big 12 teams, like the TCUs of the world, can begin to maintain success instead of just having, one really good year in 2012, a really good year in 2016, and then we don't hear anything from them in between.
I literally never even thought about that. Like that is very interesting. And I do think about what that does for the Big 12. Like that almost, it's kind of a give and take where that helps them just as much as it helps Nebraska.
I'm going to read you off a couple things. Nebraska has the longest sold out stadium streak in the country. Major. They have an incredible fan base. I've interacted with some of them on Twitter. They're passionate. They go to everything. They go to women's volleyball. They are not a historically good basketball school. They've never won an NCAA tournament game, but they still support that basketball team. I don't know if they're a historically good baseball team, but they're certainly not particularly good this year, as the Big Ten only got 2 teams into the tournament, being Indiana and Maryland. And let's be honest, Maryland's a closet ACC school. I'm just saying it makes a lot of sense for Nebraska to go back to the Big 12, to be the football big guy, and then allow Kansas and Arizona to be the basketball. Because right now the Big 12 is, make no mistake about it, with the addition of Arizona, the Big 12 is by far the best basketball conference in America. Go down the line. Kansas, Arizona, those are your tent poles for basketball. UConn, very well. I don't know if UConn's official, so I'm not including them as much in my mind. But if UConn's there, those are 3 very good blue blood-esque programs. And then after that, you have Kansas State, who had a very good year this year. They went to the Elite Eight, a first-year head coach. You had Oklahoma State, TCU, both tournament-type teams. Texas Tech went to a Final Four with Chris Beard not that long ago and has maintained some level of mediocre success.
Historically, the Big Ten has made a push. Not as much last year. I mean, obviously Purdue was incredible. We're talking about basketball.
I'm going to
But,
make the argument that the Big Ten is actually not that good in basketball. We just think they are, and then they play each other.
Iowa, Illinois, Northwestern, Purdue.
What have any of these
Rutgers
teams
is
done?
okay. Michigan, I didn't even say Michigan.
What have any of these teams done in the tournament in the last 5 years? Purdue was a 1 seed and lost to a 16 seed. Indiana Indiana, the historic blue blood
Ohio
of
State,
not in the tournament.
Well, okay, yeah. I mean, I'm more
What
speaking
has Ohio
of
State
like,
done since Greg Oden?
And Mike Conley, nothing really.
Indiana, the historic
they had decent years.
Indiana, the historic blue blood of the Big Ten, lost in the round of 32. The most exciting team in the Big Ten this year was Penn State.
Yeah, and that's because they were like a sleeper team.
That is not who you want to stake your conference on. Penn State is not a historic basketball school. I'm sorry.
That's true.
Of course, you have not D'Antonio, Michigan State.
I'm looking at his face right now.
I can see it. I saw it earlier.
He didn't he retire?
No, he's still going. Is it Mike? It's not D'Antoni, is it?
No, it's not D'Antoni. It's no.
Izzo.
Tom Izzo. Tom Izzo. Tom Izzo is their basketball coach. Mark D'Antoni's their football coach.
Yeah, he did retire. The football coach did retire, but you still have Tom Izzo, who has a single Final Four. Is it one championship or one Final Four? Oh yeah, shout out Jaren Jackson Jr. Great player.
Yeah, right. I think, let me look that up because that's a good question. I mean, you watch them compete every year, but as far as national championships go, how many do they
No, I think the Big Ten is easily the biggest fraud whenever we're talking basketball. The SEC sneakily has become, I think, the third. This year, I think they were the second best. But with the additions to the Big 12, I think they'll be the third.
Well, it's interesting because the Big Ten is like the girl that your entire friend group dated in high school. At first, she seems great. And then all of your friends are like, hey, dude, this is going to turn out bad. Stay away. Don't do it. But you're all hyped up on it, and they try to tell you. And sure enough, when it comes time in the tournament, in this case, or in life, it ends up bad.
Yeah, that's such an interesting analogy you used, Drew. I'm going to use one myself.
I love that my girlfriend just walked in when I was saying that too.
Are you familiar with the cheerleader effect?
I'm not.
So the Big Ten is a classic case of the cheerleader effect. You look at them as a group, and they all look hot because they're in a group. Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan State. And then you start to look at them individually, and you realize, what has Illinois done lately? What has Wisconsin done lately? Even these quote-unquote hot girls, what really has Michigan done?
Have they accomplished?
Michigan has not won a solo championship in football since the 1940s. They didn't make the tournament last year in basketball despite having a top 5 class to lean on. What has Ohio State done in basketball since Greg Oden? What have they done in football other than dominate an extremely weak conference and get blown out in the playoff since 2014?
It's a good argument to be made.
What have Northwestern and Rutgers done ever? What has Maryland done since they left the ACC?
I think it might be, and I've been through it. I've looked at teams I looked at Purdue this year and was like, oh, dude, this is a good team. And people do it every year.
And then you realize that they lost 2 games to Indiana and they had a first-round exit to a 16 seed.
Well, when I really realized it was when they played Rutgers in the second round of the tournament. And Rutgers shut down Zach Edey. Tournament. Yeah, excuse me, Big Ten tournament. And Rutgers shut down Zach Edey, and they had no answer. They had no answer for it. And that's when I realized, oh, these guys are frauds.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to this. I'm not done with this cheerleader effect analogy. They all look hot together, but individually, whenever you look at what they've achieved, they a dog.
This could be a new thing we point out.
Yeah.
This could be like, is this the cheerleader? Yeah, this could be something good.
Yeah. Now, I would be remiss if we were to talk about conference realignment and we did not mention the Magnificent 7 out of the ACC. Haven't been in the news, literally the Pac-12 has been dominating headlines, but we still have these 7 ACC schools that they're trying to renegotiate their media rights deal. We'll see how successful they are, but I wouldn't be surprised if the SEC made an addition of about 4 teams.
You really think so? I don't think any of the what. And who do you think?
Well, I think Clemson and Florida State are who I have my eye on. I think that's who the SEC wants, because if they get those in, then they will go to the 9-game schedule, and they don't have to worry about that 10th out of conference game.
If that happens, is there hope for any other conference besides? Can't say the Pac-12.
I think USC is such a big brand that the Big Ten, it'll be the SEC and the Big Ten.
Yeah,
but I
was
also
gonna say
think in
Big 12, but I don't know about that either.
Well, in that scenario, I think Oregon and Washington probably get bids to the Big Ten, and then it becomes D1 major and D1 minor league.
God, it's gonna be fun to watch, man. But it's gonna be impossible to get a leg up if you're a team like Memphis. That's what
I think Memphis would fall into that D1 where you will still play D1 teams in your regular season, but you will have a very different playoff postseason bowl schedule. And it might be good for Memphis. If you start having success there, maybe you can end up like UCF or Cincinnati, but you have to have sustained success.
Do you think that it means, I don't know how to word this, less, I want to say fan involvement. Another part of me wants to say viewership. Because if it ends up like that, if you end up in the minor and the major, do you think it results in a lower viewership, a lower fan involvement, just because, and we joke about this all the time, but it's honest, it just means more?
Not necessarily. I think the only thing you'll really see is more eyeballs on particular games, because there will be more major games on a week in, week out basis. But the people that watch all the games will continue to watch all the games. We have seen schools that have come up from the FCS to the FBS that have been very successful. Schools that we talk about week in and week out now. James Madison is the most recent. App State did it. And then we've talked about other teams that have been able to maintain some success at a mid-major level. I don't like to use the term mid-major because it doesn't always apply for football, but like Boise State over the years has had a very memorable program. BYU is another one that comes to mind. Navy, Memphis, UCF, Cincinnati.
Well,
there's a long road that's still to play out on this. I don't think we're anywhere near done. And I think by the time 2024 rolls around, the conferences of the ACC, Pac-12, and Big 12 as we know them could look completely different.
Completely different. And I will say, and I've kind of touched on this earlier, I'm a little worried. I do think that a lot of teams that a lot of people like could get left behind.
I do think that if the SEC is able to add, and I'll go ahead and tell you the 4 schools I'm looking at. Clemson, because they play South Carolina every year. Florida State, because they play.
Those are 2 sures for me.
Those are 2 sures that you have to target.
Yeah.
I think if you target those 2, you probably have to target Georgia Tech. Yeah, well, they play Georgia every year.
Do you think, but this is what drives me insane.
I think Georgia pulls enough weight in the conference to where they could be like, if you're going to.
How does Georgia Tech get in a Power 5 conference or be considered before Memphis? That's insane. That is insane to me.
Who won a national title more recently, Colorado or Notre Dame?
Is it Colorado?
It's Colorado. They won one in the 90s. Notre Dame's last one was 89.
By
the way, we haven't even talked about Notre Dame. If all this plays out, Notre Dame's going to the Big Ten. All their historic rivals will be in the Big Ten.
For sure. Anyway, it just makes me sick. And guys, I'm sure you're sick about me hearing.
You haven't even heard my 4th team. You haven't even heard my 4th team. North Carolina.
That, to me, makes more sense than Georgia Tech.
I mean, the only reason it's not because I think Georgia Tech is just a great fit for the SEC. I don't think that. I don't think they bring anything to the table other than the Atlanta market, which again, we're not talking in terms of TV markets. That's a 2012 argument. Streaming has made that argument completely irrelevant. But I think Kirby Smart in Georgia, if they chose to make that like a talking point, I think they could realistically have the clout to pull Georgia Tech in so that they don't have to play another Power 5 out of conference.
Kind of makes sense. Just makes me sick.
I also think there's a decent chance that Missouri could end up getting the boot and we pick up like a Virginia Tech or something.
Okay, so this is the last
And
time I'll bring this up.
To me, I'm sorry, I want to get this one point. I've been trying to say it for like 5 minutes now. To me, the SEC is far more appealing than the Big Ten in the scenario where all that happens and the Big Ten gets Oregon, Washington, because the SEC has maintained some sense of regionality. I know it's a big region at this point, but it is the South, stretching from Texas to North Carolina / Virginia.
This is the last time I'll bring this up. Guys, listeners, Tristan, who I know he doesn't hate when I talk about Memphis, but he's way more in the SEC. Where does Memphis fall in this giant web?
I mean, the absolute best case for Memphis, get your basketball program into the Big East. I don't know.
God, that sucks.
You need a creative athletic director that is willing to make Memphis very competitive at some small sports and good enough at some big sports until they can maintain long-term success. This is like my argument with teams like Rutgers, who are in New Jersey, who have very fertile recruiting grounds. And Memphis has a very good basketball and baseball recruiting ground here. There's a lot of talent in Mississippi. Memphis is much more of a baseball town than anyone would tell you. Houston, Arlington. Christian Brothers has more state titles and wins than any other school in the state of Tennessee, right in our backyard. And it's ridiculous how little emphasis has been placed on that baseball program. I know people
even though the ties are so strong. They're so strong.
I don't understand why teams like Memphis and Rutgers that have that type of base, like maybe you can't recruit in football against the big guys, but you can recruit in baseball. There's only 11.7 scholarships, and there's a ton of baseball players at D1 level and like I don't want to call it a minor level, but like that JUCO level that are looking for an opportunity. You could realistically build a competitive baseball program that competes with anyone else. The Big Ten only got 2 teams in the 64 field tournament. Rutgers could hypothetically pull something together and find that team. Not Southern Miss, Tulane won the American Athletic Conference with a 19-41 record. They have no business even sniffing the postseason. There's a spot for Memphis in there, and consistently winning your conference gets you in the tournament, gets you exposure, gets you better recruits, allows you to continue to compete, brings more brand awareness, and allows you to build other brands. Memphis basketball, huge brand. Use that type of stuff to build your other brands.
Yep, I agree. And
make Davis Crocker the athletic director.
I'd love it. Davis, luckily my dad's been a booster for a long time. Little small flex there. If I had to say, I'd push it tomorrow. It makes so much sense.
They would never let me in that office.
It makes so much sense. And we screwed ourselves by buying into Calipari and forgetting the football program for so long. I'm done talking about Memphis.
You had a legitimate Heisman candidate in D'Angelo Williams, and you couldn't invest any bit into that.
Couldn't do anything. We couldn't get him a defense. We could barely get him wide receivers. Yeah,
go off. Do it. Go off. Piss and vinegar, Drew. Piss and vinegar.
When we bought into that fraud at Kentucky, we put all of our cards on the table, and then we were like, okay, we're going to be good. We'll get into a new conference. Well, guess what? We got skipped over again, just like we've gotten skipped over the last 20 years. And how did we not know that? Gene Bailey, family friend, great guy. You screwed us. You absolutely screwed us. We have no chance of getting into a Power 5 conference where we could really make an impact. And this might be biased on me, but I really feel like we have a leg up in recruiting. We have FedEx, and when you come to Memphis, there's a special kind of love that you get. And players can capitalize off that monetarily. And the fact that we aren't able to build our programs off that, and like you said, baseball and football, really in basketball too, because there's a lot of great basketball players that come out of Memphis. It's pathetic that we are not drawing some of those players in and keeping them at home. It's ridiculous, and it's the reason that we're going to get stepped over. We're going to be a stepping stone, and we are the little brother to every school in the South, and we will be until we figure this shit out. I'm done.
I'm clipping that. That brings us to our final major topic. Super regionals are this weekend. 16 teams left. 8 regional hosts. I'm saving one in particular for last. I'm sure you can guess which one. I'm wearing my Omaval shirt. I'm wearing my cream jersey. I'm revved up. It is a war on Twitter between the Tennessee fan base and the mustard pigeons of SMU.
Could Hattiesburg be a better host? I mean, like in any world.
We're not no.
No.
Maybe in the world where Oak Ridge, where all the atom bombs are kept, blows up and Knoxville's collateral, maybe in that world. But in reality, no.
No.
All right.
Fair enough.
I'm gonna give you, we're gonna talk about the host. We're gonna give you a prediction for the game for the series. First up, you have the number 1 seed Wake Forest versus Alabama, the 16 seed in Winston-Salem. I was very impressed by Alabama in their regional.
I was too, and you sent me this earlier. I don't know enough to really make an opinion, but from what we have talked about, Alabama does look pretty good. And you could see a flip there.
I think Wake Forest is the 3rd best team in baseball this year. I know they have the 1 seed. I know they're ranked number 1. I think they're the 3rd best. Alabama plays in the best conference. We had 8 regional hosts from the SEC, 10 in the tournament, and we have 6 currently still in the field in the, I liken it to the Sweet 16 because people that don't watch baseball have a better grasp whenever you say that. 6 teams in the 16-team field. I think Alabama has definitely played. The other 2 teams, by the way, are SEC teams, Florida and LSU, also still in the competition. I think Alabama has definitely played talented teams. I think they'll be able to compete. But the biggest thing I have working against Wake Forest is no number 1 seed has won the whole thing since Miami in 2001. And that was the first year that they made the switch to this format. I like Alabama to come out of this in 3.
Alabama's been playing a lot better since the whole gambling thing too. So it seems like they've kind of brushed that chip off their, not the chip off their shoulder, but they've kind of tried to brush that negative attention off, and they played a lot better. I think you could see a surprise here.
Now, I mean, obviously this is an upset pick, but I don't know. It's more of a gut feeling than anything. So the next one we have is 15 seed South Carolina versus the 2 seed Florida in Gainesville. I think Florida right now is the best team in the country. I know they had a series earlier. Someone swept someone. I think Florida might have gotten swept. I don't quite remember how it went, but the South Carolina team that's playing right now is very different. It's very different from the South Carolina team that started the year. I like
agree.
Florida to win this one in 2 as well.
I do too.
Perhaps one of the more intriguing games we have is LSU versus Kentucky in Baton Rouge. A lot of LSU regional games got postponed, and it made the scheduling very weird.
Why was that?
Just rain.
Okay.
It was just rain. Like, they had some double headers that probably shouldn't have been double headers just because they had to make up for lost time. LSU's going to win this. They might win it in 2.
I agree.
But Paul Skeens is the best pitcher in America. I think LSU is built to win a 3-game series. I do not think LSU is built to win the whole thing because they are missing a lot of depth in that bullpen. I look for them to beat Kentucky here because they're the better team and they're at home, and they've got a lot of history and talent and 2 Golden Spikes finalists on that team. Florida's got the 3rd one. LSU's going to win here probably in 2. But I don't think they're winning the whole thing. I think they lose in Omaha, and that is a take that I have had for a while now.
Yeah, I mean, when we first got onto baseball, I think we were like probably 5, maybe 10 games in the season, and you said that. You said I don't see LSU winning at all. I agree with you. I definitely think they're going to beat Kentucky, but and I almost interrupted you and said this. They just don't have the bullpen. They just really don't. And
they have 2 really good pitchers, and then not a lot after that. Whenever you get into those double elimination areas where you have to play at least 4 games, and if you get into the losers bracket, we're looking at 5, maybe 6 games. Tough.
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't know. It's going to be interesting, but
so
they could win it all.
I don't think they can. I'm looking at
they got the bats for it. They just don't have the bullpen for it.
Well, pitching is really what wins championships. That Omaha stadium is very different than their home stadium in Baton Rouge. I know they might be comfortable there over the last 20 years, but It helps to have a good bullpen.
Okay, go on.
Next up, we have the Charlottesville Super Regional, Virginia hosting Duke. I don't really know what to make of this one.
I don't either.
I've not watched a lot of ACC ball. I'm going to lean with Virginia being the home team and the 7th seed, so hypothetically the 7th best team in the country. I guess I'm going to lean that way for a 3-game series. I did watch Duke in their regional. Fun to watch. I don't really have a lot to go off of other than that, though.
I don't either. I mean, the only thing I see about this, and I looked at this earlier, they seem to have played pretty similar schedules.
Playing the ACC.
Yeah. So, and Virginia's 48-12, Duke's 38-22. Seems like they played a lot of the same teams. It does seem like Virginia's obviously the better team here. So I have no reason to go against Virginia.
I would expect that to probably be a 3-game series as well. Stanford hosting Texas. I'm going Texas here, and let me tell you why. I have been told by reliable sources that Stanford home games in the summer might as well be the St. Jude FedEx Classic coming to Memphis this August. It is a bunch of quiet golf claps. They have trouble getting the students there. So the home field advantage, you can completely scrap that. Stanford has played 2 series against ranked teams all year, and they lost both of them. Stanford has beaten up on a very bad Pac-12, whereas Texas is kind of hot. I like Texas to win this one in 3.
I don't hate that. I really don't. I was going to say this about LSU earlier. Expect LSU to show up. When LSU's playing, expect them to show up. Basically any team in the SEC, but definitely LSU. And, now that you're saying Stanford doesn't have that advantage, this is one of those games where you're going to have to go with the hot team, or one of those series you're going to have to go with the hot team. And it certainly does seem like Texas is that.
And that brings us to probably the most interesting story of this Super Regionals. Indiana State, the national seed, one of the feel-good stories of postseason baseball so far. They won their series, and then Arkansas, the other nationally ranked seed, lost their series. So Indiana State should be hosting, but because they had to have known this coming in, maybe they didn't expect to win their region, but Indiana State in Terre Haute are hosting the Special Olympics this year. So instead of trying to rearrange their staff and hotels and pushing the Special Olympics off, they're honoring that commitment, and Fort Worth, Texas will be hosting that. TCU, in my opinion, is the hottest team in the country. Watching what they did to a very good Arkansas team is eye-opening. I think they win this in 2 games, especially since they're hosting at home.
This is what we were talking about this the other day, and I couldn't remember what team I was talking about, but this is what should have happened with Southern Miss and now it's a little bit different because Fort Worth's
We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about this in a minute.
But this is how it's supposed to go for me.
The national seed should host. There just happened to be a conflict for Indiana State, and that's unfortunate. I personally will be rooting for Indiana State because, again, it's a feel-good story. But TCU's the hottest team. I expect them to win this in 2.
Definitely.
Oregon versus Oral Roberts. Oral Roberts being another feel-good, a 4 seed to win their region, going to Oregon.
Good baseball.
Yeah.
They're playing really good baseball.
I don't really have a whole lot to say on this. I told you earlier, I don't think the Pac-12 is that great, but I don't think. Do I think a 4 seed is going to get? Do I think a 4 seed is going to get to Omaha? Not really. I mean, a 4 seed in the region.
I looked at them earlier. They look pretty good. They have some decent wins. Again, they're in the Pac-12 or whatever. I don't know.
I have no idea what conference Oral Roberts is in.
I don't really either, but I looked at their schedule earlier. I looked at some teams that they've beat, and I don't know. They look pretty good. Maybe we'll see them in Omaha.
Screw it. Cinderella lives. Oral Roberts.
There we go. Oral Roberts is our Cinderella team. We're riding with them. Let's go.
And then we come to the one that I have the most personal stake in. The Super Regional going on in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And let me tell you, the NCAA is the most corrupt institution in the United States, perhaps in the world. More corrupt than the Security and Exchange Commission, more corrupt than the IRS, more corrupt than the CIA and the Office of the President of the United States of America. This is fucking bullshit. Tennessee had a higher RPI, a higher strength of schedule, a higher official capacity. I know Southern Miss had a higher average because they have more overflow. This regional should have been in Knoxville. We have the better hotels. We have the better infrastructure to host it. We were the number 2 seed in the better region from the better conference. We absolutely should have been hosting this. And here's why we're not. The former athletic director of Southern Miss is on the 8-person committee that decided who would host this. The father of one of the baseball players on Southern Miss is also on that committee. And then finally, the most crooked snake in the grass, John Cohen, who played baseball at Mississippi State. He was the athletic director at Mississippi State, played baseball there, could have been like his legacy. They would have built him a statue. He never would have been fired. Left Mississippi State in the middle of the night to go to Auburn, where he hired one of the largest sex scandal perpetrators in Southeastern Conference history, Hugh Freeze, to Auburn. By the way, Auburn lost the regional to Southern Miss. He absolutely has a vested interest for Southern Miss to host this, because if Southern Miss goes to Omaha, it makes Auburn's loss not look nearly as bad. He already snaked Auburn into getting a regional. They were the only team that didn't have a top 16 RPI to host a regional. We've been told all year RPI is king in baseball. Tennessee 100% should have hosted that. I'm full of piss and vinegar on this. Hattiesburg might as well be a third world country. It is a one stoplight, 2-horse town. It don't even got an Applebee's from what I hear. Tennessee's winning this game in 2. They are sweeping, and we're going to Omaha.
I don't think they win in 2. I'm going to play a devil's advocate here.
I'm also going to add, I looked at the weather report. The weather is shit in Hattiesburg. It's sunny and 75 in Knoxville.
Now, it's only by a couple hundred, but Hattiesburg does hold more fans. 200 and almost 300, I think.
Who cares about overflow? We were going to have a watch party bigger than Neyland Stadium outside, just like we did for the Supers in 2021.
Yeah, but if you're playing devil's advocate, I would say
they only offered 100 tickets to the public. They didn't even do a general sell.
I understand, and I agree with you. I really do. I think it should have been held in Knoxville. No questions asked. And I do think there's a lot of corruption that's going on there. At the end of the day, though, I think their argument is, well, it holds more and Southern Miss doesn't get these types of opportunities. So we need to give this to them to
They literally hosted a super regional last year where they lost to Ole Miss.
Yeah, well, Ole Miss also won the national championship. So I don't know if that's completely
If we
fair.
replayed that tournament 100 times, that's not happening 99 times.
I'm just telling you what actually happened.
I'm here to tell you, Southern Miss doesn't deserve this opportunity.
I agree with you. I do.
Brett Favre stole welfare from the poorest citizens of Mississippi to fund the Southern Miss athletic department. That is on par with LSU stealing money from a children's hospital.
Yeah, I mean, scumbag move. I think we can all agree with that. But at the same time,
Hattiesburg has less than 20,000 people. The nicest hotel they have is the La Quinta Inn.
How many hotels do they have? Have we figured that out?
4 or 5. The best restaurant in the city limits is a Jack in the Box.
Is there one 4-star hotel in Hattiesburg, Mississippi?
No.
There can't be. You probably have too. I've driven through Hattiesburg.
No. Hattiesburg's not even a town that you just drive through. The interstate doesn't go through there. You go around it to go to Baton Rouge. There's nothing noticeable, nice, or worth visiting there. The 4th most interesting attraction in Hattiesburg is the Pocket Museum. You can Google that. That's true, by the way.
The most expensive hotel room. And look, people don't have money. People afford different hotel rooms. The most expensive hotel room for the weekend of the super regionals is $96. The La Quinta Inn and Suites in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. That's terrible. You get a hotel room at Quality Inn for $60.
So this really started off as a beef with the NCAA, and it's turned into an all-out war. And it's not a war with Southern Miss, because Southern Miss is losing, but we've got the Raging Cajuns from Lafayette have chimed in on Twitter, to which I say, we already beat you guys in basketball. LSU is now chiming in, and it's like, we beat you guys in basketball and football. I don't know how all these schools got pulled in. I know I've talked to some Ole Miss fans, and they're like, yeah, fuck Southern Miss. I'm rooting for Tennessee. I know Mississippi State split down the middle. I think Arkansas is kind of on the fence as well. but it's just it is getting ugly in the
Hattiesburg has three-star hotels, no 4-star, no 5-star,
not a
and
single Applebee's.
all 2 stars, and they are. I mean, I'm looking at a house right now that is. I mean, there's one hotel that has 20 rooms.
Listen, we've learned that hotels don't matter because Kentucky was able to host by putting players in.
They should.
Putting players in 30-year-old dorms. They're supposed to matter, but they don't.
When we put this, we're just going to put up. I'm going to clip. I'm clipping it right now.
I'm not scared.
I'm going to clip the place that you can stay, and you can rent an entire 7-bedroom house that's, I don't even know how many square feet, probably 10,000 square feet, giant, for $250 a night. You could sleep half their fan base.
All 12 of them. And like all of these accounts on Twitter, none of them have any pictures attached. They all have like a Southern Miss player, the coach, or the logo, or
just the logo is what I've seen.
And it's all got like 50 followers. I'm pretty positive it's just the same person with a bunch of different burners, and he follows himself around on each one of them. No notable sports writers. The most notable sports writer had like 6,000 followers, and he got less engagement on his tweet than I did on mine
a couple
days earlier. Yeah. There's nothing notable, interesting, or worth visiting in Hattiesburg, Mississippi.
It would take the whole town of Hattiesburg to fill that stadium up.
No.
It's 4,000. What, they have 30,000 people there? Yeah, they have 4.
You could fit 5 Hattiesburgs. Hang on. I got to do the math real quick. Hattiesburg has a little over 19,000 people in it.
So if 1 in 5 people showed up,
you could fit 5.3 Hattiesburgs in Neyland Stadium.
All it takes is 1 in 5 to show up, and it'll be full. Frauds.
And listen, when Tennessee wins this game, I will declare myself mayor of Hattiesburg. Series, whatever. It's going to be a sweep. When Tennessee wins this series, I will declare myself mayor of Hattiesburg. We're going to bulldoze that third world country of a town, and we're going to put the largest Applebee's in America. 3 stories.
It'll be like the Bass Pro of Mississippi.
It'll be like the old Charlie's Pub that used to live on the Strip in Knoxville.
So just as far as predictions go, as of now, I know you have them sweeping Ole Miss, but that's obviously biased because of your hate. Southern Miss, but that's obviously because you're biased against what has happened. I don't think they sweep them. I think Southern Miss wins a game here.
I actually have actual data to support this.
Southern Miss is good, man. They were the best team in Mississippi by far this year.
They weren't. Can I give you my data? Can I give you my reasoning?
Please.
Tennessee by far has a deeper bullpen. Southern Miss has one really good pitcher who just threw for 160 pitches across 3 days in his regional. In SEC play this year, Southern Miss lost to Mississippi State, lost to Ole Miss, lost to Alabama, and they beat Auburn 7-2. And Auburn was the fraudiest fraud to ever fraud into hosting a regional. Once again, John Cohen is crooked.
Should we start talking about Tennessee's losses, though? if we're just playing devil's advocate,
I'm more interested in Tennessee's wins at this point. I know Tennessee had a rough start to the season, but they closed out the season with wins on the road against ranked South Carolina, who hosted. They just won their regional.
How good was South Carolina at the end, though?
They just won their regional against – I do think South Carolina is a little bit healthier, but I don't think they're great. They just won their region against the 4th overall seed in the country, who by far better than Auburn. And that was a heck of a game, the 14-inning game against Clemson. That's kind of where you got to showcase the depth that Tennessee had. We only had 3 pitchers and pitched that entire game, and we were fine. Meanwhile, we awarded a team who just lost to Samford and had to fight their way out of the losers bracket. I don't know. Like what Southern Miss did, they beat Auburn, who shouldn't have hosted. They beat Samford, who, let's be honest, not that great. And then they beat an Ivy League school twice. An Ivy League school who is on their last leg at that.
I agree with you. Obviously,
Tennessee
I think
is
Tennessee
far
wins
more
this
battle
series.
tested.
I don't think that it's going to be the sweep quick in and out of Hattiesburg that you think.
What it's going to come down to is, are the bats going to be hot enough for Tennessee? We saw them come alive against Charlotte, another like good mid-major team, so like very similar to Southern Miss in that aspect.
Yeah.
Couple good players, but Tennessee dominated both those games. And then the 14-inning game against Clemson is the one that I really have circled, because if it was going to be a close game, I would have figured we would have folded. We did not fold. We held on. We ended up winning. There are some very gritty plays in that game. There's the double play that prevents Clemson from walking it off in the bottom of the 10th. There's the 2-run home run in the 9th that gives us the lead, but ultimately extends the game. And then there's the walk-off double that scores, and the hold on in the 14th inning, the bottom of the 14th, for us to walk away with the win there.
And if the Volunteers are known for anything, it's grit. I mean, the name alone. You're welcome, Texas.
You're welcome,
I'll
Texas.
say it. I'll say it.
Hey, without Tennessee, you'd be North Mexico.
Yeah, I'll say it.
I am full of piss and vinegar for this series. I can't wait.
You're hot. The most engagement we've had has been your Twitter the last 2 days.
Dude, honestly,
like I was bitching about Lindsey Graham last night, and you're fucking firing off tweets left and right.
I'm not gonna worry about 50 follower accounts from Hattiesburg, Mississippi,
with a baseball field.
That's not even a tenth of my followers at this point. Shout out to Vol Twitter and Vol Nation for keeping up.
Yeah,
too.
shout out.
All right, I've got 2 other stories. Let's fly through them real quick so I can start editing. First off, we have a group of players holding out on the NCAA video game. They are saying that the $500 that EA Sports is offering is not enough. My comment on this is $500 is more than enough. Most people are going to play the Dynasty feature. That is the feature that this game, I think, is going to lean on. It's the main one. These players
I always played, and I'm sure you did too when we were younger.
These players are not going to be in that Dynasty mode 4 years down the road. These players that could actually move the needle on this won't be there on the second year of the Dynasty. 500 is more than fair whenever you look at it in the aggregate. There's very few players that could move the needle on this. Caleb Williams is certainly one. Drake May might be one, but none of them have the star power that previous.
Even Joe Milton, maybe.
No, I don't think Joe could. But you look at some of the quarterbacks of the last couple of years: Tua, Bryce Young, Trevor Lawrence, C.J. Stroud. I think all 4 of those guys could have seriously moved the needle on this. I don't think there's like a single star in college that can do that right now. But that's just at the top. Whenever you look at it in the aggregate and you look at, not to pick on Southern Miss, but who is buying that game for the quarterback of Southern Miss? Who you'll probably never play with him. Or the lineman from Memphis. $500 to me is more than fair. And people are going to say,
100%.
Well, people are going to be like, well, they're going to be in the game in perpetuity. I hate to tell you this. They're going to make a new game every year.
Yeah, and those guys will be out. And also, what's stopping the NC from doing what they did when they were releasing games and just not putting the name on there?
Well, that's exactly what's going to happen.
Of course it is.
It's going to be like the PJ and the LIV. You can either take the 500 now, or you can be left out. And what's going to happen is the fans are going to create all the named rosters and the updated attributes, and we're just going to download it off the internet
too. Yeah, I was about to say.
I currently do that for the NCAA 14 video game that I still have on my Xbox 360.
I mean, it's so easy. You literally go on there. I forgot exactly what you do, but some type of thing of upload roster or whatever. Click a button, and within 2 minutes, you have not only Lamar Jackson or Caleb Williams, whoever you need from whatever year. Yeah, Hendon Hooker.
And I'll tell you, whenever that video game drops, forget this loss stuff. I'm going to become a professional football gamer. I have never lost a game of 14. I am so good at that game.
I'd be interested to see. I'm not as good, but maybe we can hold a little fan game tournament. That'd be fun. Put up a little.
We're not putting up money. We're not racketeering. However, it could be interesting to have maybe our best fans could get into a quick little tournament of some sorts. And in other news, Nick Saban went to Washington, D.C. to ask Congress to do something about NIL.
Yeah.
That's not a
This is a loser thing to do. This is a loser thing to do.
I'll tell. This
I
is my
love Nick
take on
Saban.
this. This is my take on this.
Okay.
Nick Saban sees the writing on the wall. He just lost to a less talented LSU team. He just lost to Tennessee for the first time in his career at Alabama. He knows he's no longer the top dog in the SEC with Georgia. He's starting Alabama has recruited fine. They have 3 of the best recruiting classes in school history of the last 6 years currently on campus. But what I think they're starting to see is teams like Tennessee that had deep pockets and teams like LSU that always had the talent and finally have a legitimate football coach in Brian Kelly. They're going to start inching closer and closer. Kirby Smart already has the model in Georgia. That's an anomaly. Not everyone is going to be back-to-back national champions with all these first-round draft picks. But I think there is reason for him to be concerned. For his entire career, since the 8 or 9 game debate has been going on since 2012-ish, Nick Saban has said, let's play 9 conference games. For the first time ever, he's now saying, let's play 8. Our 8 are better than their 9. I firmly believe that Nick Saban knows he's at the end of his career. I think he wants to win one more and retire, and I don't think he thinks he can do that if NIL is allowed to continue the way it is and if his schedule keeps getting harder.
I agree. I don't think it's going to go how you think it's going to go. First of all,
I think he's going to lose.
Nick Saban's a fighter. Everyone is out on Alabama this year, and I do understand why. They obviously have some.
A smart man never made money betting against Nick Saban.
Facts, and that's what I'm going with.
But I think very soon we're going to say a smart man never made money betting against Kirby Smart.
Yes, I'm just not. Everyone is so quick out on them, and I don't get it. They've had downer years than they were in the past, and Nick Saban has always triumphed. He's always came back. And Nick Saban with a back against the wall is a scary, scary coach to face. And I think that's kind of where he's at. And I'm not out on them yet. I think they could still possibly have a good year this year. And, if they have a good year this year, I don't think Nick Saban leaves after this year, no matter what happens. Obviously, if they, lose every game, he'll probably be out. But I think we've got 3 more years with Nick Saban, and we might not get a national championship, but I do think we'll get at least 2 appearances in the playoff.
Well, the playoff expands after this year to 12 teams. So
that is true.
A 7-5 Alabama squad is going to make a 12-team playoff. It's just, that's the reality of it.
Well, Tennessee bias in there, but
that's just a fact. I mean, what do you want me to say to that?
I mean, yeah.
If Nick Saban stays 3 more years and he doesn't win a national title, it'll be the longest spurt at Alabama without him winning a national title. I don't think he makes it. I think he gets asked to step down.
Dude.
And in the past, let me finish. In the past, whenever we've said this about, the dynasty might be ending, we've been able to look at Alabama, a position group, any position group, and been able to say, that's elite. I believe that is elite, and Alabama can lean on that, and it might not be done yet. I look at the quarterback room. Jalen Milroe has had enough time on the field to show that he could be. He's not. I've seen Tyler Buckner play at Notre Dame. He's not elite. I've seen Phil Steele and Tommy Rees, offenses and defense, for years now. They're not elite coordinators. They don't have a first-round elite drafted running back anymore. They don't have any developed wide receivers. Their best wide receiver is Jermaine Burton. And then you look at the defense, Kool-Aid McKinstry. That's a very good position group. Their DBs are still going to be very good. But they lost the number 2 overall draft pick in Bryce Young and the number 3 overall draft pick in Will Anderson. They lost another, 5-star talent in Henry To'oTo'o. And I know the draft didn't go the way he wanted, but he's still a talented player. How do you replace all of that? What position group do you look at Alabama and be like, I believe in this group to get Nick Saban through? Because I can't find it.
Alabama took in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
I'm not arguing they're not talented. I'm just arguing who's going to lead that squad. Their 2 leaders are gone. Their coordinators are brand new. And, dude, Phil Steele is not a good defensive coordinator. I'm sorry.
There's no way this is accurate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 5 stars in the 2023 class. 9.
I
You don't
believe
think
that.
one of them is going to be a game changer? I mean, if
I know.
2 of them are a game changer, they're still going to be relevant and very good.
I know it's very hard to play in the SEC as a freshman. Most people don't really get SEC ready until they've had a year of strength and conditioning. Do I believe that someone that came in December or even later, June, May, is going to be able to compete immediately with a 4-star starter at LSU? And forget about 4-star starters. We have 6-year starters now.
16 4-stars, by the way, coming in this year. 16.
Yes, they meet the blue chip ratio. I'm just saying, I don't see it this year. They're still going to be a good team. They're still going to be a good team, but are they going to be a 12-0, 11-1 team going to the playoff after they just couldn't do that with a Heisman winning quarterback and 2 top 5 draft picks on either side of the ball? No. No way.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's not this year, but I do think Nick Saban has another 3 years, and I think Alabama fans are absurd. We can all agree with that, and y'all will meet B-Diz soon, and some of his Alabama takes are a little absurd. But what you need to know is they've still got talent coming in, and they're gonna figure it out. I'm gonna go out and say Alabama wins a championship in the next 3 years.
I'll give you the last word on that. I'm ready to wrap this up.
I do. With all the recruits they have coming in, they're still good. They still got great coaching. Expect Alabama to be there.
They have one really good coach in Nick Saban and a bunch of mediocre guys.
Well, they've made it work with what people thought were mediocre for a long time. A lot of people thought Lane Kiffin was mediocre for a long time. He worked out pretty well.
Lane Kiffin's a mediocre head coach. He's a pretty good offensive coordinator. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode. I personally think it was a real heater of an episode.
This was a heater.
We'll see what it's like after it gets off the editing floor. But please follow us on Twitter at @BadTakeBlake_. Follow us on YouTube at @BadTakeBlake. If you're listening to us, you're probably listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Give us 5 stars, like, comment, let us know what regional Duke came out of. And you know what? If you're listening to this, I'm going to put a random player on the Bad Take Blake podcast. Let's start a random player thread. Like just guys being dudes, random college football players.
I'm going to make a pledge here because we spoke about my Twitter usage earlier. Every week, I don't meet at least, we'll say 5. We'll call it 5 to start out with. We'll reevaluate in 3 weeks. Every week, I don't meet 5 tweets, whether it's replies or, updates, whatever. I pick one listener who tweets me, they get $20. I'll buy them lunch.
I posted a tweet 3 days ago that has 69,000 views.
We're there, guys. We're so close.
You're talking 5. How about 5,000?
Let's do. All right, fine. You want to up it? We'll do 7. If I don't have 7 tweets by the end of this week.
Oh, I thought we were talking views. I didn't realize we were talking actual tweets.
No,
but
actual tweets.
7 tweets.
So we'll do 7 tweets at the end of the week. I'll pick a listener
who tweets at me. You have to live tweet the super regional game on Saturday.
Fair enough.
Sunday.
I was thinking
because I'm going to be at my grandmother's for her birthday, so I'm not going to be able to on Saturday.
Tennessee is Saturday, right? Or who is Saturday?
They play at 2 our time.
I thought it was 12, but you're probably right.
2 Central.
Yeah, okay, you're right. And then South Carolina is also Saturday, and Texas is Saturday. Okay. Yeah, 7 tweets. Cole, Blake, our normal interactors. You could get a free lunch. Ian, Eric, you could get a free lunch.
Trey?
Could you be in there? I don't know.
I mean,
I'll special it up. You get to pick.
Oh, I get.
I don't pick. Yeah, you get to pick.
I'm gonna go ahead and tell everyone I'm gonna do a random name generator. That is how I'm gonna pick. We're gonna keep it random because I think this qualifies as a promotion. Official terms void where prohibited. Thank you guys so much for following, watching. See you next time.
Thanks, guys.